Hi everyone, RFG here with a review for Twilight Monk, developed by Aquatic Games and published by Gravity Game Arise, available on Steam and the Switch. A hand-drawn side-scrolling Metroidvania packed with combat and platforming that also blends in RPG elements and old-school overworld exploration. Based on the illustrated novels of the same name, the game begins with a brief intro into the recent events on Crescent Isle in the realm of Speria. You'll quickly gain control of the playable character, Raziel, armed with an enchanted pillar speaking to his friend Rin about investigating an explosion that just happened outside of their master's dojo. Your core abilities at the start are a jump, a horizontal attack with your pillar, and a jump attack. You can set the pillar down for a faster but lower range kick attack that can also be used in the air, but setting your pillar down also lets you use it as a platform to jump off of for extra height. You can recall the pillar from anywhere on screen, and leaving the room automatically has the pillar equipped back on Raziel. Rooms are how the side-scrolling dungeon areas are separated. Each room in a dungeon will have its own number of enemies and will respawn each time you enter a room. Defeating enemies will earn you experience, and earning enough experience levels Raziel up. Leveling up can increase the range of damage of his attacks, and you can see Raziel's experience meter in the top left of the screen and in the menu. Enemies in this beginning area will test your basic Metroidvania combat skills. Some will require you to jump to avoid their attacks, while some may need you to jump to attack them, but a lot of this area shows you the constraints of your initial traversal abilities. Rooms here already can vary in both length and height, and while placing your pillar down can get you an extra bit of reach, you'll find it's not enough to fully explore this map. But even though your exploration is limited, getting past the first boss earns you new abilities. The first you'll gain is a double jump from a statue underneath the dojo of your master, Clue, which doesn't open up too many adventuring options at this point, but will generally be useful throughout the game. The next ability you'll gain is a Mystic Art for daggers from Master Clue. Mystic Arts are ranged attacks that you can find in various ways. Besides the daggers, you can find a throwing axe, a bomb, and more, and are able to select between them through a weapon wheel. Each Mystic Art uses Ember, which you can see at the top left of the screen next to your health/spirit. Different arts use different amounts of Ember, which you can regain by breaking lanterns that you'll find in dungeon areas or by using save points. Save points recharge both your Ember and Spirit, but like many old school games, these are the only way to save your progress. There's no autosave, and a game over means any progress you made is lost up to your last save. There's no requirement to use a save point, even if it's just to refill Spirit or Ember. Master Clue also functions as a shop where you can spend your penny, the game's currency. Shops are scattered all around the game, and most will allow you to buy 3 or 4 types of items. Most of these items are optional but are also useful, like dungeon maps, potions, and small keys for chests. You can gain penny primarily by defeating enemies and in chests, which can contain other items found throughout the game. Master Clue's shop also features talismans that you can purchase. Talismans can be equipped in the menu to augment Raziel's abilities in specific ways, but you're limited to how many slots are available for them. You can unlock more talisman slots the further you progress in the game, and you can find more talismans in other shops and areas. Most talismans offer relatively simple bonuses like extra attack range, but some can offer new abilities, and others, like in Master Clue's shop, have benefits for your Mystic Arts. Although the Mystic Art daggers you've gained don't offer any additional movement options for this area, you're not restricted from progression, as leaving the dungeon puts you into the safe town/hub area of Crescent Isle. Besides being presented in a top-down perspective, the other noticeable difference is that this hub connects several room-like areas into one accessible location. In the beginning, your main spots to visit will probably be the shop, the convenient save point, and the hideout and monastery to speak to characters like Rin and Nora, who usually lead to game progression, or to speak to other characters who can provide hints and backstory. But the village in Crescent Isle also connects directly to the game's overworld, where one of your first questlines after entering the village sends you. Unlike the village, enemies appear here, and if they make contact with Raziel, you'll be sent into a randomized battle arena. These randomized battle arenas don't actually require you to defeat the enemies within them, but can be a quick source of penny, experience, and can add to your monster hunt count. Monster hunts are a sort of long-form side quest line that gives you an amount of monster types to defeat and rewards you after a number of completed hunts. You can view the number of defeated monsters per hunt in the menu. The overworld itself is broken into sections, which you can see when opening up the map, and gives you a fairly large area to explore in each of them, with each of those sections on the overworld map having their own randomized battle arenas and enemies. But if you want to directly follow the main questline objective, it's shown in the menu in case you need a reminder. Exploration in the overworld doesn't go unrewarded though, as there are multiple points of interest such as characters, chests, and optional dungeon areas to discover out in the wild. While these side areas do have a lot to explore, there is a linear progressive structure in the game, and that's consistent with the overall dungeon designs. The traversal abilities you gain in the game through dungeons like an air dash and ground slide aren't locked in optional locations, though that doesn't mean that you won't be revisiting certain areas. Dungeons themselves mostly feature unique enemies that are also part of the Monster Hunt side quest I mentioned earlier, and each dungeon features their own aesthetic. Most will require a level of precision platforming and general combat prowess to get through. There are also a variety of puzzles scattered throughout the main dungeons, with some requiring the use of your pillar. Making your way to the end of a dungeon usually puts you in a fight against a boss. That when defeated earns you a new traversal ability at a nearby statue for your pillar, but there are more to the dungeons than this. Within the dungeons is a lot of room for exploration, and you can get a glimpse of this through their maps, which will fill out room by room when you haven't acquired one for the dungeon, or rooms visited will be boldened if you have access to its map. Besides the enemies, obstacles, puzzles, and bosses, dungeons also feature spirit fragments that you can break that increase your total spirit when 3 are found. An ember can be permanently increased by 10 when you find and break an ember stone. There are also special spiders that you can find and defeat for spider gems that have their own use. The top right of your map displays how many of each of these are within a dungeon, and your menu has a completion section to show if you're missing anything within an area. This being a Metroidvania, however, doesn't mean that you'll have all the tools necessary to collect everything in a dungeon on a single visit, but revisiting areas in Twilight Monk isn't always a tedious case. Progressing through a dungeon allows you to make shortcuts like in most games in the genre, and unlike enemies respawning when revisiting rooms, these shortcuts generally remain permanent. There are also portals within many of the dungeons that link each other to ease the pain of retrekking through its entirety to get back to a certain point. The way the Overworld map is sectioned and the travel options that open up also makes it fairly easy to navigate through to most areas. It does help that most of the areas you may want to revisit will likely end up being for something optional. Even the Crescent Isle village, which does need to be revisited on occasion, contains optional additions and is where you report your completed monster hunts for rewards. But it's the ease of accessibility of revisiting these areas with new abilities that made me want to return to see what more I could explore. And even the later areas you gain access to have a reason to come back, even if you're not a completionist. And for those who are completionists, the ease of access to previous areas becomes more convenient much later in the game, but if you don't mind breaking up your playtime, revisiting areas after gaining a new traversal ability can be worth your time, as gaining more spirit, ember, or a new talisman can be worth the break. Twilight Monk excels at how it works its overworld exploration into its Metroidvania dungeon design, which includes revisiting areas with new abilities at your own pace, and how dungeon access points are positioned to make revisiting areas not feel out of the way. Part of that is due to how locations connect to town areas like the village and Crescent Isle. While there aren't many town areas in the game, they do offer reasons to revisit for optional purposes, and even ignoring the optional content in the game, there's a good amount of variety in Twilight Monk's main progression. The hand-drawn artwork is also excellent, from the character sprites, enemies, bosses, dungeons, etc., though I'm not a fan of some character portraits. Music is another overall positive hit. Most of your time is likely to be spent in dungeons, and the tracks match the setting's atmosphere, with some being genuine bangers. The overall theme does catch the old school feeling of being grand, but not overwhelming, and has varying themes depending on what portion of the world map you're in. And even though I found the sound of activating the cannonball ability to be incredibly annoying, the rest of the sound design was actually fine. I kind of share the same opinion about the RPG elements. It's fine, though it's basically limited to leveling up your pillar for its damage range, recharges your spirit and ember when you do level up, and I do feel like it's balanced for how it's applied in Twilight Monk, but the leveling system itself just never felt necessary. You can purchase time buffs through an optional shop, but the RPG elements are minor, as it's the talismans you can acquire and the slots you can unlock through monster hunts that provide things like customization and growth, rather than through the leveling system. Combat itself remains fairly simple throughout the game, as there aren't many new combat ability talismans for Raziel, but there are useful upgrade talismans for Mystic Arts. You can gain summons to accompany you through dungeons, but these function mostly as assists rather than new combat abilities. That doesn't mean the game wasn't challenging at times, as enemy placement is sensible and some bosses can surprise you with their difficulty, but you can somewhat offset that with the potions you can buy that revive you when all spirit is lost. Even without potions to resurrect you, save points are fairly spread out and the portals to leave a dungeon are reasonably positioned, so difficulty shouldn't be too much of an issue, and if you do want a higher challenge, a hard difficulty does unlock after beating the game. If there is one thing I am disappointed with, it's the lack of placeable map markers in dungeons. While the game automatically places markers for certain locations, it doesn't let you place markers for spots you can't access at the moment but might want to return to later. As for the story, it is considered canon to the Twilight Monk illustrated novels, and even though I haven't read them, the game didn't make me feel like I was completely out of the loop of what's going on, and doesn't overly explain past events, so if you enjoy what you see in-game, then you may want to look into the novels for more context. But for the story in-game, the stakes get raised high pretty early on, but remains lighthearted with a lot of humor spread throughout. It's not without its serious moments, though it leans far more on the lighter side of things than the darker, and is pretty enjoyable and keeps up a good pace. Overall, I was impressed with what Twilight Monk has to offer. While its base combat mechanics are relatively simple, and the RPG elements can feel fairly basic, its character progression and customization based on monster hearts, talismans, and mystic arts provide a decent alternative to Metroidvanias that focus more on traditional RPG systems. Its blend of classic RPG overworld exploration with the side-scrolling Metroidvania gameplay works in a way that I really enjoyed, and I'd recommend to try to anyone interested in games in the Metroidvania genre. I do think there's solid room to expand in many of the aspects of the game, but with what's been displayed in Twilight Monk already has me anticipating what's coming next from Aquatic Moon Games. But that's it for me. Let me know what you think below. Thanks. Bye.